Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Chris Line, a staff attorney here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We've got a fun and informative show for you this week, and I'm joined by a handful of our staff with a keen interest in faith-based movies. We're going to be reacting to a couple trailers that have come out recently. We've got Sammi Lawrence, one of our legal fellows and soon-to-be staff attorney, Scott Knickelbine, our IT director, and for the first time on Ask an Atheist, Preston Bowden, one of our legal interns. Are you guys all excited for today?
Yes.
Can't wait.
Let's go.
Well, religious propaganda films have existed since the dawn of cinema, but more mainstream Christian propaganda really took off in America in 2014 with the release of God's Not Dead. It's a fictional story of an evil atheist college professor who's challenged by a righteous Christian student. That movie had a small budget of $2 million and made a whopping $64 million in the box office. While each subsequent film has made less and less money, today we're going to be looking at the trailer for the fifth installment of the franchise, God's Not Dead, In God We Trust.
And we call the God's Not Dead movies propaganda because they're clearly made by evangelical Christian filmmakers who want to portray Christianity as the correct, one true religion, a matter of fact instead of a matter of faith. Many of these films take stances on hot-button issues in our country right now, like political protest, religion in the public square, and homeschooling. Atheists in these movies are portrayed as cartoonish, evil villains, sociopaths who say things like, God is dead, or I hate God, instead of, I don't believe in God. These movies are made clearly to validate one very extremely conservative sect of Christianity and make them feel like they are the real heroes of the story and really validate the unfortunate Christian persecution complex that a lot of people have.
Yeah, so have any of you guys watched the God's Not Dead movies, any of them? Have you seen them?
I saw the first one in the series, and yeah, it was pretty cartoonish. The idea that a philosophy professor would tell you that all you had to do was sign off on the statement that God is dead, and you get an A in his class. It's like it's never that easy. So.
Yeah, I saw the first one. Actually, the second one, I wrote a blog for FFRF when I was in law school because it kind of touched on our issue. So I was an intern, I think, actually, at the time when it came out. And the second movie is actually about a teacher who happens to mention Jesus in a relatively appropriate context, actually, in class. If you can find our blog on Free Thought now. But basically, as I touched on the blog, it's like, it wasn't even an issue that we would write about here at FFRF. If someone reported, yeah, teacher, in passing brought up Jesus along with like Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever the plot was, we wouldn't actually even write about it, but they decided to make a whole movie about that teacher going to court and, luckily, of course, she won the case and was able to continue being a Christian. It was not illegal at that time. So I did then skip, despite how great that movie was, I skipped the third one and the fourth one. I haven't seen either of those. I'm familiar with them though, but I am probably going to actually check out this fifth one and do a write-up for it for FFRF. So I will endure that for you. You're welcome. Now, before we begin, let me just read a synopsis of God's Not Dead 5. Amid political and spiritual turmoil, Reverend David Hill steps up to run for Congress. Opponent Peter Kane aims to erase religion for policy, and the fight becomes a beacon of hope for people seeking moral leadership in a divided world. So let's take a look at the trailer, and we'll do our best to point out some of the most alarming messages.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Now more than ever, Christians must realize that we are being called to deliver hope to a country that's feeling hopeless. Faith begins where your comfort zone ends. We need to step out into that faith.
Wow. So I don't know if you caught the opening there, but there's actually was some January 6th footage. Actually, it appears to be, we looked it up and it appears to actually be footage from January 6th. I'm not sure what side they're on or what the message is taking on this, but it seems like a weird thing to put in your movie trailer, I think.
It was a bunch of people who were just out there where their comfort zone ended.
Yeah, and other people's rights began, and trespassing began, and overthrowing an election began.
Yeah, I mean, we actually report, we did FFRF with Baptist Joint Committee. We did a whole big report on all of the religiosity that took place at January 6th. That wasn't the footage they used. They didn't show the crosses and the religious messages and things that were there that possibly used to beat police officers with. But they did think it was important to include that along with this sort of inspirational messaging there from Ronald Reagan, saying, if we're not one nation under God, we'll be one nation gone under. But as most of our viewers probably know, one nation under God, that's, comes from the Pledge of Allegiance, but the under God part was actually added in the 1950s. So, shortly before Reagan was even around, and hardly something from the, founding era or anything as, we often hear. I think he said something in the trailer like, faith begins where
Your comfort zone
ends.
Yeah.
I actually completely disagree with that. I think that, I mean, truly though, like, especially, and that's sort of what the point of this movie show is, like, faith is their comfort zone, and they're afraid to leave that comfort zone and go out into the real secular world where a professor is going to tell you God's not real and try to make you profess that. Or if you're a teacher and you say, if you mention Jesus' name in class, then you're going to be punished for it, and things like that.
A world that doesn't exist, because none of that actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, and that I think we'll get to that as we go through this and we talk more, but I mean, that's, I think, going to show to be the theme of these films, is that they live in almost a reverse world, a bizarre world that everything is backwards, and, instead of being the majority of the country, Christians are somehow oppressed, but they try to pretend that's the real world, that somehow 65-70% of the country is oppressing itself, presumably, because I don't know who else, or is the 35% non-Christian part somehow beating the double amount that's Christian in this country,
Go ahead.
I was just about to say, I feel like they showed us a little bit about them going out into the secular world with that Jan 6 footage, right? Like, what does that exactly look like to them?
Yeah, I guess they're pointing out those protesters were, oppressed and not able, were put down by the secular police forces protecting our nation's capital. So.
I think it's interesting that the same actor who played the pastor in the first movie is back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, in the first movie, he's sort of like a ne'er-do-well, kind of a schlub. Now they've put a beard on him, which I imagine is supposed to add some gravitas of some sort. Like he could actually win an election. For
Yeah,
something.
no, he just looks like knockoff Chad Kroger from Nickelback, honestly.
Yeah, I don't want to blow your mind here, Scott. He's actually, not only is he in this movie, he is the main character of every single movie.
Oh,
He's
okay.
also the
Also,
producer.
yeah, I was just about to say, he also created the series and is the
Yeah.
whole mind, the brains behind the whole thing. Which, is a great thing. I mean, that happens for most producers then will make themselves, of course, the star and will keep making the movies even though they don't necessarily make money or anything like that, So, yeah, maybe we'll go ahead and move on and just see what else we have coming from the trailer.
We need to step out into that faith.
We're 6 weeks out from Election Day, and a lot of folks have lost hope in the future of our country.
We must maintain a wall of separation between church and state. Religion has no place in the public square.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite things that they like to do is they take something real and they have to just throw something fake on there just to like overemphasize the point and take it out of reality, So like, for example, I could totally see, someone should, and unfortunately they don't do it enough, but a politician coming out and saying that we need to stand up for separation of church and state, that's great, that's what it should be. But that can't be where he ends because that's too reasonable, it's too realistic. He has to then say, we have to get religion out of the public square. Now, changing the message, because that's not the point. We want to protect religious freedom in this country by ensuring that our politicians are not using their position to impose religion. But then they try to conflate that with the public square, acting like, you as a everyday Christian can't express your religious viewpoint. It's like, no, that's not what anyone's saying at all. That's not what the separation of church means. That's not what that wall means. But they have to conflate that. That's why they immediately have them say that, to make sure you don't accidentally agree with the evil, atheist.
I think one of the things that excited me so much about this trailer was seeing Ray Wise as the evil senator. For those who may not remember, one of Ray Wise's most famous roles was as Leland Palmer in Twin Peaks.
That's a yes.
And so, got a lot of coverage, primetime coverage on that. He appeared in a few episodes of the third season more recently. So just to have him, so that all of that kind of comes along. People are going to be familiar with that role and how crazy and evil it was when they see him saying things like, we should have a firm separation between church and state. So it's automatically, associating those messages with something, satanic or evil, just by who you've chosen to play the actor.
Yeah, I love Twin Peaks. I feel like they're really trying to appeal to me specifically as a big Twin Peaks fan. It's not working, I'm here to say.
Yeah, some more insider info for you, Scott. So he actually appears as the same character in the second movie.
Oh.
At that time, he was an ACLU lawyer. He's the one who leads taking down this evil teacher who, dare utter Jesus' name in a public school. He's the same character, so even within their universe, he's being the same. So now he's gone from ACLU attorney to candidate for public office, running. So we've unfortunately, for the people who have had to see these movies before, he's a familiar face even within the realm. Also, the movie, I don't know if you noticed, comes out September 12th. They mention it taking place just weeks before Election Day, which kind of closely aligns it to our Election Day. So kind of emphasizing that not only is this propaganda for Christians, but it may have a very pointed, direct message to try to get Christians out to the polls, to vote for people like this pastor who are going to stop people, like the attorney there that's fighting for the separation of church and state. So very pointed messaging.
They have to make sure that everything is caricatured in that regard, right?
Yeah. I don't know if this is the best time to bring this up, but one thing I noticed, I'm pretty sure, so I think all the other movies previously took place in Arkansas, so I believe there's very high likelihood this takes place in Arkansas. So it's also laughable, this idea that in Arkansas there would be an election where the attorney who's voicing that the separation of church and state is important, that's the front runner. The Christian, so in this Arkansas election, this Christian is really struggling. And so keep that in mind as we watch the rest of the trailer, that this poor Christian is going to struggle to be a Christian in politics in Arkansas and somehow be taken seriously and have a chance to win. So we'll watch a little bit more and see how that goes for him.
Religion has no place in the public square.
Once they bankrupt our country, they will have complete control.
Where did we go wrong, Lord?
We need someone who can light a fire in the voters.
The preacher. He helped on those education hearings.
I've been hired to manage your campaign for Congress.
I'm not a politician.
If you don't take on this fight, we could lose everything.
We could lose everything. This is the most important Congress seat in the entire world, apparently, because everything is hinging on this one Congress. I don't know what is happening in this world, but apparently they're one seat away from flipping Congress or something that's going to, and then Congress somehow is controlling everything, and everything relies on this one Congress seat. So
well, and I also wonder, and it won't be the last reference in this trailer to they or them. Who is it that exactly wants to bankrupt the United States government?
I think it's us, theoretically, is who they're thinking.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, we are not that powerful. We also don't want to bankrupt the United States, just to be clear.
Well, you don't speak for everyone. I just want to.
Chris wants to.
Maybe Chris does.
No, but it just, yeah, exactly. This whole premise is just ridiculous that this one election would, obviously they have to do it. They can't just say, oh, you're going to run for a seat and be a member of Congress and a part of the government. It has to be everything on the line. If this doesn't happen, Christianity's over. Mm-hmm. They've lost. This is the one. This is it. This is Christianity versus non-Christianity. Which kind of really ruins the stakes of the previous movies, because I don't know, but that was the stakes of every single one. The first movie, this kid's got to write this amazing essay about how God's real, because everything on the line. If this teacher doesn't win her court case, Christianity will be illegal, and everything. That's the theme of these movies. They have to go real big. They can't just frame it in small terms, because that's how Christians want to frame all their media. It's us against the world. It's us against evil. If we don't win, evil wins. Everything is on the line all the time. We constantly see that kind of messaging.
Don't you know, life's just a zero-sum game. If Christians lose, everyone loses. Life loses. If atheists win, the apocalypse happens.
That's probably what they think is the thing.
No, literally. I mean, that's what the movie's telling us, or all the God's Not Dead movies.
I think there's also an attempt here to just short circuit political reasoning in general. I mean, I think you've diagnosed the sort of the meta narrative here, which is it's good versus evil, even though it is for some congressional seat in Arkansas. It's like you don't need to think about things like policy or background or anything like that. It's just good versus evil. And so in a sense, your faith not only becomes a good source of information on your political leanings, it becomes the only information that you can trust. And so I think that's really kind of what really underpins not only the whole series, but this particular movie is going to be about all the terrible things you've been whispered to in the background. They're all true, and you don't have to look for any evidence or anything like that. Just they're true, and you've got to vote this way. And so I think that really is getting close. I mean, aside from just simply the misstatements of fact in the trailer, that's really getting closer to the propaganda value of it. You don't need to think about politics the way we have traditionally thought about it. You just have to think about this myth of good versus evil and pick the right side.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're exactly right. Like, who needs nuance when you have David A.R. White's amazing production and writing to tell you what to think?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I know it's propaganda for Christians, but like so much of the movie, multiple of the movies, like really appeals to me and makes me very sad that I don't live in some aspects of this world. Because of how over the top they go, this makes I think like completely unrealistic things realistic. Like in the second movie, like I said, they're actually upholding the separation of church and state, which we see rapidly. The Supreme Court's Kennedy decision definitely wouldn't have come down in this world because that would be too good for the Christians. And then even more so, looking at this movie, I don't know that I've ever in my entire life was able to cast a vote for an atheist, because that's not how the real world works. Mm-hmm. Both sides are Christian in essentially every election. Mm-hmm. There aren't really people like this. There are people who are willing to protect the separation of church and state, but they're not atheists, and nobody's running as open atheists. And frankly, wouldn't be able to win. Certainly wouldn't be the, front runner, the one, making this Christian the underdog against an atheist. That aspect of it, I would love to live in that world where we could see more atheists running for office and being able to be successful and not have to pander to Christian audience in the way that this politician in the movie is going to, and that the movie as a whole is going to. So let's keep going.
We could lose everything.
They found someone to run against you.
Are we worried about a preacher?
My next guest is a candidate for Congress. You're going to get a lot of questions about your faith.
Well, maybe people are looking for more spiritual and moral leadership in Washington.
You're making God an easy target for them, Pastor.
God's not the target, Lottie. Our country is. God's just standing in their way.
Well, this is kind of an evolution, actually, from the first few movies, because in the first few movies, it was very much like, God is everything. Like, even the atheist professor really is just mad at God. It's all about God. Yep. Now they've moved on to like, oh, we know this messaging doesn't work, so let's go with the more political messaging of, oh, the evil people are actually after the country. Like, they don't even care about God. And God's just,
there's they again. God is just standing in their way. I mean, who is they again?
I know.
It's the same rhetoric.
Christians just love their pronouns. So.
Yeah. Yes.
It's hard to,
Famous fans of pronouns, Christians.
Yeah.
and obviously, as I'm sure everyone noticed, we got our Mike Huckabee cameo there. Famous sort of Christian politician, jumping in to be a part of this. My guess is they probably solicited a lot of people like that to be in it, and it's interesting to see which ones did and didn't. Obviously, they were able to get Mike Huckabee probably pretty easily, but you don't see a lot of even other Christians aren't necessarily affiliated. That's why they keep having sort of the same core group of people appearing in these movies. They're not getting, they'd love to have bigger stars come in, but even like Christian stars know that this is not something they should be involved in, that this is Christian propaganda, and that it would be a joke for them to jump in. So you only see certain people. Obviously, David White, who's make these movies. All right, let's go ahead and keep going.
I will not be made a fool of. I won't stop until your moral high ground crumbles beneath your feet.
You don't win unless you play by their rules.
I feel like I have two options. I can either do the things my faith asks me not to, or I lose this race. It's like God keeps putting these impossible mountains in front of me.
Perhaps God put those mountains in front of you to show that they can be moved.
That representative seems like a very upstanding citizen.
Well, I'm convinced, honestly. Yeah, I'm sold.
Yeah, I mean, like you were kind of pointing out, this sort of the over-the-top atheist character. I won't stop until your moral high ground crumbles beneath your feet. He's over-the-top evil. You can't just be fighting for what he wants or anything. It's got to be like a personal attack on Christians and on the country and things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely how we all talk here at FFRF. A lot of our staff are non-religious, and we go around talking like a bad Emperor Palpatine impersonator all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, just that idea that they live in this sort of warped world, and this obviously appeals to that warped world that they've heard about, and it's kind of a flip-flop on what really goes on in the real world. Let's continue.
Let's pray for David, guys.
In God we trust.
This contest is about shaping the future of our nation.
Keep your boy in line. Because like his God, I can give it and I can take it away.
How do you know it's God?
Reverend Hill, your beliefs are a textbook example of Christian nationalism.
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them a Christian nationalist.
So it's the little fist pump there, like, oh, you nailed that one, Reverend. It's like what surprises me, and I wonder whether that particular line is actually going to survive to the theatrical release, is that now that you've got people like Josh Hawley saying, yeah, I'm a Christian nationalist, what the hell are you going to do about it? Marjorie Taylor Greene's been on that train for a long time now. I mean, nobody's apologizing for that anymore. Nobody's saying, Christian nationalist, moi? I mean, they're basically adopting that entire political stance again as a kind of a short circuit way to getting to the evangelical right that's taken over the Republican Party. So nobody's. I mean, I really wonder who that message. Oh well, you just trot out that phrase Christian nationalism whenever I say something you don't like. I mean, that's not the position Christian nationalists are taking anymore. It's like, oh no, it's not like that's a misnomer. It's that's exactly what we believe, and we're coming for you.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but that is the biggest argument they're making now. Still is this, so it's definitely going to stay in the movie because that's what they're doing. That's almost in those exact words we're hearing. That's like the big argument we're getting against Christian nationalism is, oh, you're just describing Christianity as Christian nationalism. Like we're Christians and you're calling us Christian nationalists. So that's the way they're doing. But there is a very strong and obvious distinction between it, because I mean, as I noted, the majority of our lawmakers are Christian, and they have been essentially since the founding. I mean, the founding fathers, it actually may have been a little bit less Christian in the beginning, and then it ramped up at various times, as we know. But we've had Christian lawmakers throughout our history, but those people often, and there were also Christian nationalists, actually from the founding too, but we've had Christians in government who understood that their religious beliefs are personal unto them, and that they believed and they upheld the separation of church and state. So even though they had Christian views, they didn't try to use our government to impose it on everyone else. They understood that that's sort of the project of America, and what the founding fathers did. They said, we're going to have everyone come together regardless of your religious background, and you're all, you can all be Americans. We'll all be Americans together. That's sort of our project, is to bring in people from diverse backgrounds and form one country with that diversity.
And even Christianity itself is like almost a misnomer, because there's different sects, and that's what was going on at the founding. You had like Presbyterians, you had Episcopalians, and you had Congregationalists, and even Congregationalists split apart and fought each other once, like in New Jersey specifically. And that's why they ended up needing to build a secular nation, because otherwise all these different sects would try to fight one another for power, for the government power.
Of course, and that was really the impetus of the separation of church and state. It was not about, this was not a time where they were worried about, atheists versus Christians. It was truly about the various sects worrying about other religions, coming, potentially taking over, or you'd have to abide by some other religion's rules and things like that. Which makes sense. I mean, like even before the founding, when the Pilgrims came over, it was for religious reasons. A lot of them did want to have, a country be their religion, but that's sort of, and some of the states were the same way. A lot of the states would have wanted to kind of impose religion, but that's sort of what the Constitution then was a contract between those various factions, where we agreed, like, okay, here's the best way we can do this. We can spend all our time like the Europeans, like we've seen in the past history, where everyone fights constantly about religion and can't get along. And we said, let's avoid all that. Let's have a country where there is no official religion. We're not going to use the government to push religion, and that's going to allow us to grow, stronger as a country and to get along with each other. And I think, we've seen, over the couple hundred years that our country's been around, that it's been great. And yet still, despite that, these people with this movie and Christian nationalists across the country want to, get rid of that and want to form a Christian nation where, you have to adhere to Christianity, or you need to get out, which is completely against what our country stands for. So we'll go ahead and watch the final clip here.
We need to stand up. Send a message to Washington. Tell them you're not ready to give that power up. You have the power to change things. Not me, not him, you.
In God we trust.
And without God, democracy will not and cannot long endure.
Wow. Well, Reagan directly refuting what I just said, and saying that without God, democracy can't endure. When actually, as I kind of got at in this last segment I was talking, our democracy endures because we're not, forced to fight over which God is real and which religion is real and things like that. That's what allows us to have this democracy, is that we respect different people's views, different people's backgrounds, and really, like our original motto before it was changed, to In God We Trust, E pluribus unum, from many come one, kind of the complete opposite of what Reagan's trying to sell there, and to kind of cap off what this movie, is also trying to sell.
Well, I think it's also interesting, this idea that democracy is dependent upon a specific review or specific view of religion, or a specific set of beliefs. And we hear that, of course, in the wild all the time. Like somehow democracy is built on some kind of notions that somehow came down from Western Christianity. And of course, it gets very difficult to determine what exactly those might be. But the fact that, like, if we didn't have God looking out for us, we wouldn't be able to maintain our democracy. Is just sort of, again, it's an article of faith. It's not anything you can demonstrate in any sense of the word. So to basically say one is dependent on the other, when in fact now one is being directly threatened by the other. That's I think, so taking I mean, because this whole discussion back in Reagan's day, I think that was footage from one of his speeches before the National Religious Broadcasters or something like that. So he was laying it on thick. But the conversation was different back then. Now it really has moved to the point is, well, Jesus ought to really be our commander in chief. And if you don't like that, well, we can find a nice prison cell for you. I mean, it's basically what it comes down to. And so some of the glittering generalities that may have been not as threatening sounding in Reagan's day are a lot more frightening today.
Well, I mean, and that's clearly why in the movie that they had to make the evil atheist be the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if they made a more realistic movie where the opponent is actually just a Christian who disagrees with you on a lot of policy issues. Doesn't quite make for the same movie when it's, we're fighting for God against those Christians who are fighting for a different interpretation of God and his beliefs. We disagree on it and we're going to try to work through it. Doesn't quite make the same kind of movie as the, we're fighting for God against the evil atheist, which, as I pointed out earlier, just unfortunately doesn't happen in politics. We don't get to have, I'm sure, we've got non-religious members of Congress, humanists. I'm also sure that there are definitely Congress people who are atheists, but they just will never be able to say so because they wouldn't be in Congress for very long if they did, unfortunately. And, hopefully we can move more towards a world, like the world pictured in the Gods Not Dead universe, where apparently you can be an atheist and not only run for office, be the favorite, and be in power and have all the control. And
the latest Pew research shows that even the religiously non-affiliated won't vote for atheists for public office. So it's not like it's somehow, I'm going to get on this bandwagon.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, unfortunately for us, we see it. I mean, when we have the school board members who are constantly choosing to promote religion over doing their job, that works because then they get those Christian voters to come out and keep electing them because they're Christians and because, either they feel like they have to or, they're convinced by situations like this where they're, the sort of Christian propaganda that non-Christian things are evil. And so, I kind of wish I had a school board member who was doing more for my kids, but can't let evil win, can I? I've really got to keep this Christian board member on, even though it seems like all they care about is promoting Christianity, So it really just causes problems for all of us. So
the idea is, that occurs to me throughout watching this entire trailer is, what is this movie supposed to do? And I think you kind of raised a little bit earlier, Chris, that it's to provide a substitute for lived reality. It's a substitute that finally aligns with your faith, where the bad people are all bad people and there's no moral ambiguity. The very first movie in the series was the same thing. It's like you look at the life on a college campus that would never actually happen, but because you're sitting there and you're seeing it, these people up on the screen, you get the feeling like, oh yeah, somehow life really is like that. That it's just an inversion of what reality is, and that's that's what I guess I really find frightening about it. People will watch a movie like this and figure that they know something about politics, or that they know something about the relationship between religion and government, when in fact they don't, and all they will have had is their presuppositions confirmed for them.
I'm going to make a bold prediction related to that point. So you may or may not recall, the end of the first movie, they tell you to text a friend.
Now let me ask you a question. Have you got your cell phones on you? Good. All right, now while this next song is playing, I want everyone to go to their contacts and click on everybody you know and text them. 3 simple words. God's not dead.
They do something similar in the second movie. I don't know about the third or fourth movie. I'm willing to bet that they are going to tell people to go out and vote at the end of this movie. that is going to in place of the texting front. I don't know. So I have no insider info. So if this ends up happening, I am psychic, and you'll have to note that. But I have a very strong suspicion, just based on the tone of the movie, the theme, and everything, and just knowing exactly what you said, like what is the point of this movie. I really would not be surprised if it's going to end with that, with them telling people to go out and vote. And like we said, it's it comes out on September 12th or something like that. So getting towards election season, so that people will be
tuned in.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to blame Ronald Reagan for God's Not Dead 5. And if we get a sixth one, I'm also going to blame Ronald Reagan for that.
Yeah, it's hard. It feels like it's been ramping up so much. I mean, that really is the takeaway here. It started as a college professor, who's trying to push his religion, moved on to religion in the schools, kind of got bigger. The fourth one was about homeschooling. And now they're tackling Christian nationalism. They're tackling really what's going on in this country and the really big issue here. I don't even know where they could really go from here.
What's next? Bigger. God's not dead in space. They
fight
atheist aliens.
The United Nations.
Star Trek edition of God's Not Dead.
We have one more trailer to react to, though. This one's a lot shorter. Average Joe is made by the same producers as the original God's Not Dead, and it's based on the true story of Joe Kennedy, a high school football coach who famously won a Supreme Court battle in 2022, giving him the constitutional right to pray at the 50-yard line after his team's games. But the movie seems to be dramatizing a pretty deceptive narrative, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first part of this trailer.
We ready? I've been fighting my whole life. You told me that saying a prayer on the 50-yard line was the thing that was going to get me in the biggest fight of my life. You cannot tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor.
You got the whole crowd
What
laughing.
the hell was that?
Yeah. I'm going to start with just a plug. I did do a blog about this trailer. I called it Below Average Joe, that you can read on Free Thought Now. But, I touch on a lot of what we'll probably touch on here, that this, right, even in the beginning, shows him in the military. And my understanding, he's given interviews where he said that he did see combat when he was in the military. And yet somehow the fight to lead students in prayer on the 50-yard line of football games, that's his big life battle after even having served in the military. Which honestly, it's a little bit disrespectful to his fellow military members to suggest that that wasn't the real battle that they had to go through. But when they come back and have to, deal with things like the separation of church and state and whether they're violating what they should be doing in their public role, or I guess spoilers, not doing illegal anymore because the Supreme Court bought what this movie is trying to sell and bought the sort of narrative that they're selling in this movie and found that his prayers were constitutional. Now, of course, they had to lie to do so in the same way that this movie is. So I kind of feel like this movie is just the Supreme Court version of what happened in the Kennedy case. So I don't know if Gorsuch is the main screenwriter on this, but he may have been. Certainly, I hope he should get a credit in the credits. Hopefully, they give him credit for creating this narrative, this pretend version of the world where Joe Kennedy is some kind of hero who was oppressed, because he just wanted to pray, just simple private prayer.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they, and maybe this happens in the movie, certainly happens in the trailer, where the visual themes of him being in combat are brought up over and over and over again. And the last, as we'll see, the last reference in the trailer is a military reference. And it's so it's almost as if this fight to pray on the 50-yard line is a war. It is a military conflict. It seems to me to be attempting to conflate the two. And I think it also appeals to this, we've certainly read a lot this year about people sort of rejecting this idea of a pacifist Christ as being that's too weak, that's too flabby. We have no interest in that. We need somebody who can get up with with an automatic rifle. and start firing. And I wonder whether, once again, that the constant depiction of military combat in this film and boot camp and all those other things is a way of saying, oh, now we're toughened up. We're not going with that Jesus meek and mild stuff anymore. We're locked and loaded.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's that old Family Guy episode that was like Lethal Weapon to Jesus is Back or something. It was a spoof on the Mel Gibson movies.
Passion of the Christ 2. Crucify this.
But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to oppress people in a country if you're preaching peace and unity. It's a lot easier to oppress people if you're teaching literal violence.
It's like a Rambo-fication of like the faith-based movies here. It's just fetishizing violence, fetishizing strength, might equals right.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, that it is a fetishization of this sort of hyper toxic masculinity that will now take over sort of the religious sensibilities of the, if I can use that term, of the religious right and of Christian nationalists. I mean,
and God wants that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, that's important because, I mean, as I allude to in my blog, like the true stories is actually pretty boring. So you have to throw these elements in. Even within this, they know they're like, oh, if we just tell the story, it's going to be boring. So let's like cut back to him in the military and show something exciting.
Yeah.
But let's keep going and see what else is in this trailer.
They want you to pray in the locker room.
Do you not see how absurd this is?
Nobody cared for 7 years. Now they do.
I bet you can guess where this is going. I believe they violated your rights.
You're appealing to the Supreme Court.
I can't stop. Not now.
It's been 3 years of our lives turned completely upside down.
Will you finish this with me? Because I can't do it without you.
I'm proud of you, no matter what happens.
It's all her fault.
What?
You're the one who taught me that there are still things worth fighting for. Hoorah!
I'm really curious how they're going to deal with the fact that he's just an assistant coach and he's not the head coach of the team. And I wonder if we're going to even see maybe in the background you can see the head coach who's actually leading the team and in charge of the team, and him with everyone, leading everyone. I feel like they're going to basically depict him as the head coach of the team, which of course is
not. They won't mention the fact that he moved to Florida like halfway through the lawsuit and gave up his job and house in Bremerton, Washington.
Yeah, sure. There'll be a big touching moment where he resigns from the coaching position that he was just reinstated from.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if they do actually include the fact that he moved to Florida and frame it as like he was chased out of town. Probably, I mean, that wouldn't. You could see like a weird kid note. I'm assuming it was like thrown through his window or something, and then it's like cutout magazine, like kidnapper style note, and maybe that's what forced him to move across the country, and so he ran, but he always wanted to come back to Washington the whole time,
You think they'll depict all the threats the school district receives after he got it blown up in the media?
Yeah, I'm guessing not. I also just wonder how it's going to end too, as well, because obviously, as we know, the real life story is he won the case. Went back to coached one game, and then left. And he's not a coach anymore. He's back on the Christian circuit, talking about this story, rather than being there, coaching the kids, which, who knows how much he really cared about that anyway. This, of course, was an assistant coaching position. I know he wasn't the head coach. This was not his team. This was a team he was working on. That he, they allude to in the movie that he, was praying for a while and nobody really cared. And that sort of happened in real life where once it became an issue, and they just tried to work really hard with him to get him to stop. And, not to stop praying, but to stop praying in the way he was doing it and making a spectacle. They were like, they tried to do reasonable accommodations with him, like, hey, why don't you pray, as they showed that part in the movie, why don't you pray in the locker room, nobody will see you. And of course we know, from our experience in real life, prayer apparently does nothing if it can't be seen. Like if a city council member were to pray to themselves before they went out to the city council meeting, that's useless. They have to commandeer the entire city council meeting. Otherwise the prayer doesn't count. Literally the opposite of what, I don't typically go to the Bible because I don't care about it, but, in Matthew in the Bible, when they talk about praying, it's, don't be like the hypocrites, you should be, praying should be a thing that you do for yourself, to pray to God, but that's not how we see in this country. It's a message, it's all about sending a message, and that's what this movie's about. He doesn't care about getting his prayer in for whatever he's praying for. I don't know, it's after the game, so probably not to win, because it's already determined whether they won or not. Presumably not praying to keep the kids safe either, because once again the game is over. So whatever he's praying about after the game, just saying thank you or something, maybe, he can't just do that to himself, because that's not the point. The point is that he wants everyone to know he's a Christian. He wants to eventually end up having a movie made about himself. And so we're kind of living through his whole fantasy, and the reason why he started doing this in the first place right now. He probably wanted us here at this table talking about him, and so we're just giving. He got it all.
Reality. We're just living
everything he wanted. Yeah, but it's unfortunate for the kids, who presumably wanted to just play football, and while he was there, he took over this whole spectacle. He then spent nearly a decade working to get this before the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court that had rejected the case. They just kept fighting, got lucky, and the Supreme Court turned to become a very hard-right conservative court that doesn't value the separation of church and state. So that's when we had Gorsuch writing his opinion, where he rewrote the facts of what happened. As I said, the facts that are similar to this movie, that even Sotomayor had to point out in her dissent, this isn't what's happening. This was not a quiet. And that's really, for people who don't know, that's what the crux of the case was, is that the court said these are quiet, private prayers. This guy just wants to pray privately alone, and we just gotta leave. He's not a coach anymore, so just leave him alone. Let him go do his prayer, which is not what happened. So hopefully we can get a Sotomayor version of the movie. We'll get her to write the real one, and we can show what really happened, which is that this assistant coach, who is not actually the coach of the team, commandeered and took attention away, to the point where the school district tried as hard as they could to get him to stop. He wouldn't, to the point where the head coach then had to say, listen, I don't think we can have this guy back again next year as an assistant coach, because he just won't stop praying and making a big spectacle of things. We're just kind of trying to play football here. He then didn't even try to reapply after that. He just immediately went and filed a lawsuit, and, as I said, fought for years on the lawsuit, went to the Supreme Court, and they then lied to, make this version of the story where he was some poor martyr who just wanted to pray to himself, when in reality he wanted to pray, to be seen praying. And now he has, and now there's a Supreme Court doing it, and now he's made a movie so people can see him pray extra, and he's the most seen, on the big screen, that there is.
You think they get any royalties for the story they wrote?
Yeah,
for this fan fiction, basically.
Right. This ties in with the God's Not Dead movie that we saw, that it's just creating this alternate reality, taking things that are kind of true. There are politicians who want to protect the separation of church and state, completely destroying it and saying, nope, they're evil atheists. This coach did pray, but he was trying to pray with his team, just changing the fact. That's exactly what they do. It's the same thing our Supreme Court's doing with all the cases. Let's go ahead and alter the facts so that we can rule in favor of religion and make it seem like there's a problem in this country. Even Justice Alito, one of the justices on the Supreme Court, constantly rails on how hard a time Christians have it, and that he doesn't view himself as enabling things like this. He views himself as, protecting a downtrodden majority, as I said, that in this country, and they really feel like they're being oppressed, and then they're making movies like this to help make sure that people continue to feel that way. When in reality, they're not being oppressed, and we're just working, people like atheists, people that have Freedom from Religion Foundation that work to protect the separation of church and state, to create a country where, he could pray on his own, off the field, not as a coach, and then the students don't have to be forced to do that. Any students who want to pray on their own can do that. People who don't want to pray don't have to pray. We're all able to get along, and we don't have to have situations like this playing out. We don't have to turn it into a big political battle, when there's a lot more important things that we could be worried about and that we could be working together to fight, as opposed to having to deal with proving we're not evil and that things that aren't of God or Christian aren't evil. And that's sort of what all these faith-based movies are about.
I wonder whether or not the sense of being persecuted is really just an outgrowth of the feeling that that Christianity is losing the majority.
Oh, yeah, 100%. This is the last dying breath of a majority that is going to be losing its place. And that's why, I mean, Christian nationalism is also very much white Christian nationalism. We're on track to be a minority country. We're on track to have more non-religious people. We have well over 100 religions represented in our country now. We have way more diverse families, way more diverse people. The people who were in power, Christian, conservative white guys for most of our history, are losing that, and they're freaking out, and that's what this is.
Yeah.
They view themselves, because they're losing their power, that somehow that means they don't get any piece of the pie in this in the future. It's just like it's that zero-sum game mentality. If someone who doesn't have rights gets rights, I lose rights then.
Exactly. And like I said, and through these movies, doing that self-perpetuation, where it's like they feel that way, they make a movie that depicts things that way, making people more strongly feel that way. And when in reality, I promise you, as one of the evil atheists working to protect the separation of church and state, I have, as people grow, as the generations become less religious, which is what we're seeing demographically, we have no intention of, making it illegal to be a Christian or outlawing Christianity, or like the other movie we weren't able to do, Disciples in the Night or Dark or whatever, is another movie that just came out, but that's about these 7 Christians smuggling a Bible across the country because Bibles are illegal. Mike Pence actually endorsed the movie, sort of warning, using it as like a warning, like, hey, this is what we're coming to in this country. And that's just not, if anyone was going to, like, if there were any people that are these evil atheists that feel that way, I feel like it would be us at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and I can promise you that's not how we feel or what we want. I really do. Listen, I don't believe in God. I find it, I understand why some people do, actually, but it doesn't appeal to me, but I don't care. Like, I'm not trying to, like, make other people stop being religious, and that's how they paint it, as though that's something we want necessarily.
They don't seem to want to understand that outlawing Christianity or making the Bible ownership criminal would be every bit as much a violation of the Establishment Clause as putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom. They find it difficult to understand that we're actually defending a principle here, not just trying to get away with some devil worship or something like that.
Yeah. And of course, it never comes up because these are the situations that come up. But like, for example, like if your math teacher was telling kids like, God's not real, I would say that's inappropriate. That teacher should be rightly punished and not able to do that. I mean, that's what secular means. I mean, we deal with that being conflated all the time. They try to do it in these movies as well, to act like, as Ryan Walter sort of says, secularism is promoting atheism. They treat it so anything that's the absence of God, if we're not talking about God, that's atheism. So like schools are atheistic because you don't spend all your time talking about God, and in reality, it's just not true. It's neutrality. And that's what we should have in this country, at least for our public schools, for our government, is neutrality, where nobody, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, you're Jewish, Muslim, nobody should feel favored or disfavored. We should all feel like we're on a level playing field. And Christians have been in control of those things for so long that now that someone's trying to say, maybe you shouldn't get this privilege, it looks like this warped world we're seeing in all these movies where, they're trying to stop Christians from being Christian, when in reality we all just want our religious freedom to believe what we want to believe and not have that imposed on us. And Christians want the same thing too. They just, are so afraid that they would rather, a lot of them would rather impose that because they're so afraid of losing it. So, well, that wraps up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. Don't miss our weekly radio show, Free Thought Radio. This week, FFRF co-presidents Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker will be speaking with Kara Fitzpatrick the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Death of Public School, How Conservatives Won the War Over Education in America. You can find Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't miss the latest episode of We Dissent, the only podcast hosted exclusively by women lawyers discussing state-church separation. You can find We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts or at we-dissent.org.
We also have a lot of fun and irreverent merch available on our online store. There's t-shirts, bumper stickers, pins, coffee mugs, books, and so much more. You can check all that out by visiting ffrf.org/shop.
Finally, if you'd like more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, visit us at our website at ffrf.org. If you're already a member, thank you. And if you're not, please join us. So that concludes this week's FFRF's Ask an Atheist. See you next time.